There's not many games that have imprinted onto me in the same way as those from my first game console, the PlayStation 2, and its library of micro machines, gadget racers, some incredible licensed platformers, and a few games from the later days on the Wii. For as much as I love what I play now, they'll never quite encapsulate my childhood in the same way. Or so I thought. Hi there, it's lovely to be with you, and welcome to a casual review of the capsule-sized game of Omochapon. With a setting based in the after-hours serenity of an empty mall, purpose based around Japan's infamous gachapon machines, and with gameplay based on literally everything, to be honest, Omochapon just really was there for me in hard times. Let's talk about all the toys you'll play as, with the rudimentary toy car being the one to drive you towards the opening, heavily inspired by the Koro-Q pullback vehicles popular throughout Japan, and also my childhood. This is a basic push a direction and go playstyle. You can't jump, but you can use a speed boost with very little cooldown, which also plays all the satisfactory sounds of a real pullback vehicle, but in a form factor that doesn't halt your momentum. There are also ramps that the car is built for, and if you boost off of those, you can get some extra distance, which is sometimes mandatory. But driving is my general go-to for traversal anyway, because he's just so fast. Playing with the car feels a lot like playing Micro Machines. Quite literally, the two games control fairly similarly, with all the satisfaction of rattling along at such a minuscule stature being translated over perfectly. The car is quickly partnered up with the Hopping Bunny, who is quite slow, but I believe he will someday jump to the moon, clearly inspired by popping toys and NASA's Apollo missions.
Houston, what the hell is this?
Early on, its obstacles aren't much more complicated than skipping over an already filled pothole, but once your team has expanded, so has the risk of messing up with this guy. Despite the hair moving at a tortoise pace, things feel so much faster and lively to avoid while platforming, making this not only a test of comprehending the third dimension, but a test of tactics and timing. You can name pretty much any 3D platformer for the comparison here, but to avoid saying the obvious, I'll go with Enter the Gecko. Next is a bug. Likely generally inspired by fidget toys, but I'd like to imagine there's also a bit of Moosh King in here too. The bug is very sturdy, and their gimmick is using a hard shell to walk through winds. But their main appeal to me is when they come up to these marble course-like sections, appropriately becoming a game similar to the countless games in that genre, essentially a lighter version of Super Monkey Ball. From here, the characters become a bit too specialized for individual focus, or get unlocked so late into the game that I think it would be a disservice to spoil their fundamentals without giving you a chance to experience it yourself. I will say though, the plane gives potential for a lot of big skips, and I think a New Game Plus starting with all the unlocks would have a very tense speedrunning potential. As for the game's pacing, the first half hour doesn't tempt to develop advanced mechanics outside of the fundamentals expected from each toy genre, leading you through a comfortably unchallenging and nostalgic tour of a gaudy mall scene through the jovial attitude of being young again. Too excited to wait to get home before playing with a new toy. Each toy, or playable character, gives a lot of audible and often visual feedback to the player. Juxtaposing the environment's tranquility with said feedback of each toy's most subtle movements feels powerful. I feel free to move, the controls feel very responsive, and I feel at fault when I mess up, stopping me from lashing out at the game and feeling motivated to get up and instantly push on. I'm also very thankful for a very fast respawn time. Once you've passed the first two zones or shops, everything moves so rapidly while still giving moment-to-moment obstacles a spotlight to be remembered, whether it be through difficulty or the ever-changing visual design of each area. Backpedaling a little bit, shortly after recovering the robot from a warehouse, which is a little under halfway to completing the game continues to delve further from the typical consumer-trodden areas and into environments with improbable platforming arrangements in the back rooms. At this point, the botched plastic team feels reliant on each other and each other's expertise working together, rather than there being occasional switching for the sake of individualized segments, and despite there being a clear linear route, the previous openness of your path gives you confidence in experimenting with different characters to traverse through each section. And it's a small touch, but everything is color-coded per character, which themselves are vivid and vibrant against the world's color palette, which occasionally hints at which character you should be using when it comes to the car and the rabbit, rather than characters like the robot, where they kind of make it obvious that you should be using him. You might compare this to the trope of yellow paint in video games being an obvious guide on where to go, but I kind of disagree with that, because it's very, very obvious who you need to use regardless, so it generally reinforces the usefulness of each character in context of the game world. Of course, I've been taking notes so I can ramble to you about what I thought and felt playing Omochapon a little more coherently than a face-to-face conversation, but a common thing I couldn't stop gushing over was how so much of the user interface was made into a natural part of the game world. The map screen is displayed on a monitor within the mall, and when you get close to it, you can see the pixel components distort and become their original RGB values. I like that. Organic and things. The enemies are cleaning robots and color-coded to hazard signs such as wet floor, be careful, and to access the second area, you need to overcome steps, which comes from unlocking the rabbit in the first area, so it's all so natural. And on that note, when you unlock a new character, their controls are shown through the use of a paper manual included with the toy. Everything is just so integrated within the world, it's so diegetic. Playing through this game made me so reminiscent of my childhood collection, between the various genres the game emulates and the sheer charm and charisma protruding throughout the experience. This is a game made from a solid idea and developed with clear passion in mind. If video games are considered art, then I consider this game the whole gallery. So yeah, I really like this game, and something that I also want to touch on is there's a lot of collectibles, and there's also challenges you unlock in the post-game, which does a few things. For one, it adds a lot of replay value, but it also has customization options for your characters. I didn't really want to go in depth about them because spoilers, but